screen. One sec. I want to make sure. Okay, so welcome everyone to the October webinar for Catch the Next. Today I am thrilled to introduce two of our colleagues from Dallas County Community College. First, we have Dr. Sharon Mana, who is a professor of government at the North Lake campus. And with the School of Law and Public Service, she's also a faculty fellow for the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And she's also the coordinator for the Dallas County Faculty Mentoring Program. Our second speaker is Dr. Catherine Prieto Olivarez, who is the Interim Dean for Academic Services at Dallas County Community College, and she has been someone who has been spearheading the efforts at Dallas County Community College with regards to guided pathways and for implementing that. And so I am going to share my screen, and yeah, if y'all just want to give me a verbal cue when you need it, and I will move the screen forward. So the floor is yours, ladies.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us today. What we want to talk about today is how we have and still need to engage our faculty with guided pathways, how to move those strategies into the classroom, particularly in light of some organizational changes that we've had within our district that we will address in a little bit, and also in light of some of the reports that have come out through SESI about how to engage and what types of strategies to employ. Next slide. We've already been introduced, so hi, I'm Sharon. Just as a little bit of background, I've been involved with the Guided Pathways movement at Dallas College for about 5 years now. Catherine and I have worked very closely about implementing guided pathways for probably about 3.5 years. Is that right, Catherine?
I mean, it feels like longer most days, but
it does.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, next slide.
So, as you are all familiar with, these are the 4 pillars, right? The 4 pillars of guided pathways really keeps us grounded about the work that we're doing with guided pathways and with our students and at our institutions. And so the way we kind of continue to conceptualize it, again, it's mapping those pathways and clarifying it for students, making sure they choose and enter a correct program or guided pathway, keeping them on the path, right? How do we ensure that they're staying there? And then, of course, the 4th pillar, ensuring that students are learning, which, just to give you an idea, so we know that the Building Momentum report came out from SESI probably about 2 weeks ago. And so our title is kind of a little bit of a riff on that as well, because we understand that's where we need more momentum, is really with our faculty. So on the next slide.
On the next slide, we see the areas that faculty are typically engaged in with regard to pathways. Now, keep in mind, every school that goes through a guided pathways redesign chooses which work groups engage with the different pillars. Some colleges decide that pillar 1, creating the pathway, creating those, whatever, the meta majors and the pathways and the academic maps themselves. Sometimes advising does that. We decided that we were going to have faculty very intimately involved there because they're the content matter experts. Pillars 2 and 3 then tend to create the impression among faculty that this is an advising thing, especially if they hadn't been involved in the initial drafting of those pathways. And then we come back in pillar 4, ensuring that students are learning is the core requirement and responsibility for faculty at any institution. And this is the area where we need to build, maintain, and repeat that momentum, because oftentimes, given a number of other considerations and responsibilities, faculty will fall back into thinking that well, Pathways is an advising responsibility, student services. But we touch we touch students more than any other work group on our campuses. So it's incumbent upon faculty to make sure that they are enmeshing those guided pathways principles in what they're doing in the classroom. So we want to explain what we've done at Dallas College and where we still need to go, and some of the ideas that we are trying to discuss with our colleagues to make sure that they're understanding what Pillar 4 really means. Next slide, please.
So some of the things that we've done, what's worked so far with us at Dallas College, which I'm going to go ahead and I know this is new for us as well, but we are now Dallas College. We have merged, we've consolidated from 7 separately accredited colleges into 1. And so at Dallas College, what we've created is faculty mapping teams, right? So what we did when we started it, back when we were 7 independently accredited colleges, was we worked with faculty from all 7 colleges and all different types of programs and disciplines to get them involved in the mapping process to really understand what does it look like for a student to start in your program and move through to completion of an associate's degree, of a certificate, or moving from one certificate to the next onto a completion of the Associate of Applied Science degree. And so that was a really important thing to do for that. The other thing that Sharon created, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about it, was Fundamentals of Guided Pathways course, which was a professional development course, which interestingly enough, our staff have really taken to that course and have really used it as a fundamental understanding of what guided pathways is supposed to be with our college. But on the faculty side, that looks a little bit different. Sharon, if you want to chime in on that.
The idea of the fundamentals course was an effort to engage faculty at the start. You know, we had our faculty mapping teams, but that was really a very small subset of our faculty. And with 1,000+ full-time faculty, we needed to make sure that they were on board. And in the beginning, every institution has to make sure that they have buy-in for redesign of their institutions. And so the fundamentals course was designed to grab faculty in a way that they would understand the system created by a faculty member. And we did have some early engagement with that, but as Catherine said, over time, as I looked at our completers, we had way more student services employees that went through the program and were all on board with that, whereas faculty tended to fall off because they had other professional development requirements. So if there's a lesson in there, it's that you need good professional development. You also need your leadership to prioritize that and ensure that it is trickling down from deans to coordinators to full-time and even adjunct faculty. Additionally, one of the things that we tried to do was to basically in institutional redesign, you need to change the culture. And the best way to change the culture is to grab the new people. And so for the last few years, we had engaged in what we call the new faculty boot camps, where our new faculty hires would be required to attend a 2-week boot camp before the start of the semester. And they would run the gamut of every kind of requirement and every procedure throughout their colleges and campuses. And then we made sure that guided pathways was an essential part of that. So they would understand that this is not only what we're becoming, but it is what we are. Regrettably, in our reorganization, that the new faculty boot camps have changed. But as part of my role in the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, we have an opportunity to redesign professional development and to ensure that guided pathways principles flow through all of that. Catherine, you want to talk about
Yeah, so professional development days. So one of the things that we do at Dallas College, because we have so many people and so many different things that we want to talk to them about and engage with. Typically at the very beginning of the semesters, usually during faculty return week, at the last day of faculty return week, and then again during the spring semester, about 2 or 3 weeks after we've started, or maybe a couple more weeks before spring break, we do these larger professional development days. And it's usually kind of a one-day, all-day session. And what we've done is really try to get at the faculty who are coming to those, as well as the staff, but really engage them in reconceptualizing what a guided pathways framework looks like overall. One of the things that Sharon and I have been, I would say, almost evangelizing, if you will, right? Like at the in our network at the college, we are the we are kind of the faces behind the work that's been going on with a lot of the work with the faculty and the mapping for guided pathways, but ultimately is really getting to the next steps. That guided pathways is more than a map. And what does that look like for us? So some of our professional development days and conference day sessions have really focused on the additional things and additional support services that we can provide to students that really tackle those ideas of helping students to get on and stay on a path, right? Because that's really important. There's no use in having a map that tells you how to finish if you don't have the money to do it, if you don't have the counseling supports you need, the food you need to keep you healthy and happy daily, right? Because if you're sitting in class and you're hungry, you're not thinking, you're not concentrating, you're not applying those skills that we want you to as faculty to apply in your classrooms. And so a lot of our conference day activities have focused on some of those additional supports as well to get to, you know, this kind of conceptualizing guided pathways beyond just the map of how we can get students from one end to the other. And so that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. Oh my gosh, yeah, 3.5 years at the district at Dallas College doing that work. And then Sharon's really been integral on Pillar 4, and I'll let her go into more detail on some of that work that she's been doing.
And so this is another area where we see the need to create and to maintain momentum. So back in February, and I had to think about this a little while ago, it was just this past February that I presented at our TCCTA conference about faculty and employing GPS strategies under Pillar 4. It seems like it was like 2 years ago with the pandemic and everything, but it was only a few months ago. And I co-presented with a colleague from Austin Community College, and she and I were trying to discuss with faculty how they're probably already doing things that comport with Pillar 4, and they just need to refashion or reframe them. And faculty need to be able to see that guided pathways principles make sense within all of the other requirements that they need. And sometimes this is where our efforts tend to fall short. I ran into a bunch of colleagues in the hotel, you know, in the hallways, and they said, well, we don't need to come to your session today because we know all about that. And that's not essentially true, because in building and maintaining that momentum, you need to be able to repeat and reflect and change what you're doing based upon the principles. Can we switch the slide? And I think someone is in the chat saying they can't see the PowerPoint.
Can you please share the PowerPoint?
It should be on this. Oh, it's in the chat. The PowerPoint's in the chat and it should be on the screen.
Okay, yeah, I see it on the screen. I just don't see the link on the chat.
The file is, I think it's the first thing Erin put into the chat.
Okay, I'll check it.
We can put it again in there.
Yeah, we can send
There it
again.
is. Excellent.
Oh, she shot it. Okay. Thanks, Erin. So this is where we've been, right? What we've done already, and it again over the last 3.5 years or so. But there are more things that we need to do to build and reinforce that momentum. And as Catherine mentioned before, we have this reorganization, and it's chaotic. And there's been significant change in roles. I have a different role. Catherine has a little bit of a different role. Our leadership has changed. But we need to look at that reorganization as an opportunity to reinforce Pathways principles. And so, Catherine, why don't you tell them about how we've reorganized according to GPS?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thing. So again, like I mentioned, 7 colleges, now 1. So we're consolidating and merging into 1 college with 7 different campuses, which provides a lot of exciting opportunities for us here. Ultimately, I would say a lot of the chaos is good. Chaos because it's really taking a look at what we're doing fundamentally to help our students succeed. And really, I think that also is aligned exactly with the work of Guided Pathways. With Guided Pathways, what we ended up creating about 4 years ago, which was right before I actually started the work with Dallas College and Guided Pathways, was really creating what would be our meta majors and what we now call career paths. So we as a college adopted, and across the 7 colleges at the time, adopted 7 career paths, which are those broad meta majors that we underline and really get everything to go with. And so as we have those 7 career paths created, as we moved into 1 college and as we moved into looking into what would be the best way to organize, particularly as we emphasize the need to align our work with either the career or transfer outcomes of our students, then what ended up happening was we ended up aligning to the schools of approach. Now in Dallas College, we are 1 college with 7 schools of its education, public service, just to name a couple. And really, those names and the naming conventions were very similarly aligned with the career paths that had already been created, such that we were lockstep. Once those schools of and their names and the way the programs would be aligned are still working themselves out, but have been named and whatnot, we have now updated all of the career paths to match the titles, and as well for all of the guided pathways to align with where program alignment will meet and across that board. So now when a student goes to select a career path, ultimately they're selecting the school of health sciences or education, to where they will intend to complete either the associate's degree or certificate and then the associate's degree in the former fashion so they choose. And really, again, is aligning all of this kind of lockstep with guided pathways, but to the needs of the students. And how can we best support our students in a manner that allows us to see them through the journey from beginning to end with as little hiccups as possible to make sure they get to their career or to transfer and where they ultimately want to go. And so it's really been an exciting time to see how we can continue making a change across our institution for the needs of our students, and also how Guided Pathways is really in line with a lot of this. As we've been looking towards the Guided Pathways work we're doing at Dallas College, we're kind of also reframing it in a conversation of, is this really kind of like a second life to it as well? How do we continue to align the work that we're doing to make sure that all of the key metrics we want to make sure are happening do, and that the faculty we want to engage with as far as how we engage with them in the programs in which they lie, in the schools in which they belong, and overall at the college is happening in a way that is meaningful for both the staff and the faculty members, but also in a way that is meaningful to the student. So they may not necessarily see the beginning work that happens between faculty and employees to make this all occur, but the student benefits at the end. And that's really what matters. And so that's what we've been doing. In fact, all of our professional development, even over the last to say 3 to 4 months since I feel like since we've been in COVID is kind of a thing I know I've been saying because it's kind of in a surreal state, right? But ultimately, being in this new virtual world, we've actually moved a lot of our professional development to virtual trainings and key 1 hour, 2 hour things, or, and when we've done them live, we see staff and some faculty, but mostly staff, really engaged with the material and wanting to find out more. And now that's taking that momentum that we've been building with some of those training and development things and then moving it into the faculty work, which is where Sharon really has that kind of key responsibility with some of the work she's been doing.
So I moved over to our new Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Before our reorganization and restructure, each college had their own level of professional development for faculty. Some had teaching and learning centers, some did not. And under Dallas College, we're looking at that opportunity to have a centralized teaching and learning center. And we have a variety of what are called faculty fellows that have different portfolios to try to develop college-wide professional development. And my portfolio is on teaching effectiveness. And what we're finding is that we need to reach out to faculty and to leadership and also to students to define what teaching effectiveness is for Dallas College. It's very contextual. It's different from a 4-year university to a 4-year college to a 2-year college. And teaching effectiveness has to fit into the context of what our students need. And so to that end, we started out doing some preliminary surveying to find out from faculty what they think the best Dallas College teachers should do. What should they be? How should they serve their students? And what we found is for a variety of domains that they could choose from, that we kept seeing the top 3 responses again and again. And those responses had to do, of course, with content mastery. They had to do with enthusiasm or passion for teaching. But consistently, we saw a response that said that teachers that have built trusting relationships with their students are the best teachers. We're going to ask students. We have a student survey that's coming out in, let's say, 2 weeks. And we're going to ask them what they expect from the best teachers in Dallas College. And from there, we can connect back what our expectations are for effective teaching to those guided pathways principles. And again, get faculty to understand that they're doing wonderful things already. They just haven't seen them within the lens of Pillar 4. And so to not overwhelm them. I mean, our faculty moved, whole cloth to online teaching. They've had to figure out, some of them still don't know who their supervisors are under our reorganization. So it's a high level of stress trying to be effective online teachers, but we can't forget our reorganization and our redesign under guided pathways. So luckily, what was it, the other day, CESI put out a really good playbook for how to reach faculty with regard to guided pathways. What types of strategies should be employed? What types of professional development should be created? And so we're going to start college-wide conversations on what are the good things that are happening already. And we can't hide them within departments or campuses anymore. They have to be available for use and learning college-wide. And this goes back to the bigger conversation that my colleague and I had during our TCCTA presentation. And if Erin, if you'll move the slide. We need to look at the things that our faculty do, understanding that there are limitations in how we assess. And so here in Texas, we have state mandated course learning outcomes. Right? We have college-wide program level outcomes. But that doesn't mean that we can't reimagine those learning outcomes to meet what we expect in guided pathways. Why can't we add on things like 21st century skills. Our survey results from our own faculty said that they want to learn about how students learn, the differences between the adult learner and the dual credit or the early college high school student, how to reach different types of neurodiverse students, how to make sure that they are creating, and I hate this term, how are they learning those soft skills that they need to take with them into employment or into transfer? Well, those are simple things. As we create assessments, do those assessments satisfy both requirements? And those are conversations then that need to be had because lots of our faculty are doing those things already. We looked at, Ceci talked about advising and the faculty role in advising. Lots of our faculty who are in career and technical education already do that, have always been doing that. But on the transfer side, any advising typically is informal. And so we need to start having conversations about what role, if any, in Dallas College will faculty have in advising students in a formal way. The Ceci report talked about applied learning and asset-based learning to make sure that students are having assessments that are relevant to their lives, that take into account the skills and the experiences they bring with them. And this is outside, we have content experts that teach our classes, but sometimes they forget to look outside and understand who their students are and how they can better engage with their students and accomplish all the goals that we've set out for ourselves simply by tweaking some assignments. And so that, again, you can't force those things and you have to make sure that there are conversations that are had, understanding that has created training that makes faculty comfortable with making those changes. The last thing that's related to that is to make sure that faculty understand the services that are available to students. Catherine talked before about how we have to consider the entire student experience. It's not just whether I'm a government faculty member. So it's not whether or not they pass my federal government class, but do they have access to a decent level of, of Wi-Fi to get their assignments done? Do they have enough to eat, right? Do they have a home to go to? And what resources can we provide to them if we find that they are lacking? And this is another area where faculty tend to feel overwhelmed because they're already doing so many different things. Questions I've heard in previous presentations have been things like, well, why do I need to know that? And I can't possibly know everything. Well, we need to create resources so that it's an easy ask. If you can reach out and you know that a student is hurting in some way, click a link that gets them to the services they need. But really what we're finding is that our faculty, it's not that they don't want to, they don't know. Can we switch the slide, please? So when we presented at TCCTA, my co-presenter and I said, we really need to engage with our attendees and say, hey, you're probably already doing Pillar 4. You're probably already infusing guided pathways principles. You just don't realize it. And so, apologies to Jeff Foxworthy. You might be doing Pillar 4 if you, click please, if you're changing your teaching techniques. Are you changing up your assessments? Are you making them relevant? Are you making them current? Or are we still looking at the same English 1301 assignments from 30 years ago? If you're relevant, if you're making things related to students' pathways or their lives, or allowing them to bring their expertise and their experiences into the classroom, you're doing Pillar 4. How about the next one? Are you choosing resources that are affordable and relevant to students? One of the things in our Dallas College reorganization has been a move to an all-inclusive tuition model. This is the first semester we're doing this. It has had its bumps. But generally speaking, we increased tuition, but we have day one access now. And so we don't have to worry that students are going without because they can't afford those texts. But if for those who don't have all-inclusive models, if you pick something, you know, if you're choosing between a $120 textbook and a $60 textbook or an open, you know, OER resource, the ones that students are going to use are the ones that are most effective. Next. Again, as I mentioned before, do you know the right places to send students when they need help? Just as an example, I had a student the other day that could not get her work done because her laptop screen had cracked. And she was having to go someplace else to get her work done after working a long shift. So I checked in, and our campuses have limited student lab times. You have to make appointments. Well, I didn't know any of that. I haven't been on campus. I know that now, and I can share that resource. And she was relieved because now she had an option other than having to go beg another family member to use a computer. Next. Provide resources in the classroom. I can't tell you how many boxes of Costco granola bars I've gone through over the last couple of years. And it's a simple matter. I don't know who's hungry and who's not, but I know if my students are hungry, they are not paying attention to me. And so $8 for a big box of granola bars, I would walk into the classroom before anyone else got there, I would open it up and I'd leave it in the back. And so whether those students were well fed or whether they were food insecure, I knew that at least for that hour and 20 minutes that they were going to have something in their belly so they could pay attention. Now, do you require that? Absolutely not. But if it's something you can do, that connects, that builds that trusting relationship between faculty and their students. Next. Excuse me. Contextualize assessments. This is one way, again, to make learning relevant. Students go through their core curriculum on their way to transfer, or they're taking certain core requirements in their CTE programs and wonder, why do I have to take Texas government? What does this mean for me? Well, we have to find ways to make sure that as we assess our students, they are learning why the course is meaningful to them, not just in that semester, not to check a box, but because it's important. And so if we can get faculty to align those assessments with students, with their career pathways, then students will be much more eager to finish out those assignments. It makes them meaningful. Next, please. This is the big question I ask my faculty all the time. Are you intellectually curious about what your students' experiences are like? You know, most of my colleagues teach at the community college level or at the college or university level because they fell in love with higher education when they were there. And they may not have the same experiences. Luckily, I'm a first generation student, so I understand that. But I don't have many of the same experiences that students in my classes do. So I need to ask. And a simple ask can create that level of empathy and relationship building. It can be confidential. I usually do it in a syllabus quiz. I say, what do I need to know about you to help you be successful? I can then understand what limitations or challenges students have, whether or not I can direct them to services, what level of flexibility I need to apply to that student's work. I had one semester where I had, I think, 3 online classes and 3 or 4 pregnant women. And as I've learned, babies do not read the syllabus. They show up when they feel like. And so understanding that made it easier for me to work with those students and make sure that they could be successful at a time that was exceedingly stressful for them. So I just tell my faculty all the time, I know you have a lot of stuff to read and a lot of papers to grade. Just ask about them. They'll tell you everything. Next. Lastly, and again, one of the opportunities we have in our redesign is having those conversations about improving teaching and learning. Looking at the things we've done in the past, do they work? And if they don't, why not? And how can we change them to make sure that we are addressing the principles of guided pathways? And I'm hopeful that under our new Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, that those conversations, instead of being pockets across campuses, are now big college-wide conversations. And some of those conversations, honestly, will be a little stressful and a little difficult. People may get defensive about the work that they've done already and have, have pride in it, as they should. But they need to look at it in the light of how our student population has changed, what obstacles they face, and really what's the point of our jobs. And our jobs is to make sure that they are successful. Next.
All right, so this is it. We are to the end of our presentation. I appreciate the Jeff Foxworthy spin of, if you're doing this, you may be doing Pillar 4. I think that's entirely awesome. I think when we have these opportunities to discuss all the work that we're doing with guided pathways and really engage faculty as well about it, it's really having that conversation of, are you really doing something different, or are you doing what you're already doing and maybe tweaking it a little bit, or having a better understanding of how it really does apply to guided pathways, right? Because maybe there's already something that's being done, but we don't know it, right? Or nobody's told us, hey, that fits along the lines of a guided pathways approach. So I really love that, and thank you for that. So we are done. If you guys have any questions, if there are any questions on the call right now for us, for Sharon and Manna, Dr. Manna and I, please let us know, either through the chat function or Erin, I don't know if you are or could, or if we'll facilitate any raised hands or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. However, so first of all, thank you very much for that. I know that, guided pathways at various community colleges, and Catherine and I, who are long-term friends, have talked about this a lot over the years. It's something that has been very anxiety inducing for faculty. I think that Sharon, your discussion about teaching, teaching is something that's a very personal activity. It's something that folks take a lot of pride in. I think for those of us who have been teaching for a long time, it can feel really difficult to take feedback and to adapt accordingly. If anybody has any questions, you can put it in the chat box. I'll try to keep an eye. I'm going to stop sharing the screen just so I can, it's my screen, so I can see if anybody's raising their hands or has any reactions. But
I'll go next if you don't mind.
No, go ahead, Dr. Chavez.
First of all, thank you so much for joining us. I know Dr. Olivarez has been with us in the past, and we enjoy having her so much that we wanted to see her again, particularly now with all the changes. And thank you, Dr. Manna, for joining us. It's been very informative. As you know, we have a comprehensive program that focuses on teaching, advising, mentoring, student leadership, community engagement, and the like. And of course, with our work comes professional development. We have required professional development seminars, and we actually are partnering with UT Austin, and we grant credit for them through the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy. And we have been following your work, Dr. Olivarez, work in particular, over the years. And like everybody else, we're trying to figure out how we can get our colleges to better utilize these internal resources at the campus, and we're trying to get our colleges to have a um, more, I guess, visible relationship with guided pathways, particularly because we're so entrenched in the teaching aspect of things. We actually train the faculty that teach our courses, and we work with them in their tweaking of their syllabi, and we actually model for them what we think should go on in the classroom. So with that said, I was really wondering about how you go about getting, you mentioned something about getting the faculty to redefine and reprioritize their domains of teaching. So I was a little curious about that and wonder if you could expand a little more on what that means.
So that the short answer is TBD, right? But the longer answer is, again, our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning is brand new. And the faculty fellows, we just got our steering team together, and we are planning out sessions, and we do a number of different areas. We have DEI and online teaching and other areas, and my portfolio happens to be teaching effectiveness. And so once we figured out what faculty expect out of themselves in order to serve students, now what we're going to do is we're going to develop professional development around the practices and strategies that help students be effective. So there will be, we already talked about the creation of our Settle webpage to make sure there's resources for faculty, easy, one click to find those services that students can use. We're going to start to look at the strategies that CESI has recommended, things like project-based learning, writing intensive courses, collaborative work. We'll engage with our service learning folks to make sure that it's not just something you do kind of for extra credit, but in some way it feeds into your pathway that is made meaningful with reflection. And I think that's another thing that has been spotty from college to college, and now we're just one college and have that opportunity to make that a little bit more meaningful. One of the other things that we're in the process of trying to implement college-wide, big college-wide, is a streamlined teaching squares program. And so I don't know if you're familiar with teaching squares, but it's basically a joint visitation of faculty from different disciplines, and it is usually very a positive-based, positive feedback-based professional development. And there's always food involved, so lots of faculty join, you know. But one of the things we've tried to do in the past, and we're going to try to reinforce again, is not just to have the faculty participate in visiting their classrooms and reflecting on their practices, but adding in advising. We tried it at my particular campus, we called it Teaching Squares Plus. And so we asked that the 4 faculty join with an advisor, so that advisor would visit each faculty member's classes, and then the faculty would go and, with a student's permission, participate in an advising session. And this is it's a silo breaking activity. Gets to build a little bit, I know what you do, you know what I do, and then faculty will have a face rather than just a last name on the schedule when that advisor goes to help them sign up for classes. And so we're going to try to implement that too. Some of the logistical issues involve things like, do we do it based on school of? Do we keep it within the campus? It's going to all be online in the spring. How many people do we accommodate? What's the interest level? There's a lot of logistical issues, but that's a really popular program that gets faculty to see the other good things that their colleagues are doing, And then in a reflection, then we can create almost a clearinghouse of these are the best practices. And if you're doing them already, we can align them with pathways.
Mhm. So I see more of an integration then of the guided pathways with the teaching and learning work that you're going to be doing. Is that
At least in my little corner of it, yeah.
right? Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's ideal really to get the results that you want, to be able to have those communities of practice, together. It's interesting because our webinar series is called Teaching and Learning for Student Success. And we've been doing it since 2012. And part of the idea was to bring, community leaders, campus leaders, and scholars and authors to educate us as you're doing right now. And so I gather that when you talk about contextualizing the curriculum and assessments, that's more in line with the work that you'll be doing with the center.
Yes, and what we want to do is provide some training to explain how that can be done
Right.
rather easily. So I'll just give you the example of what I do in one of my classes. I have a semester-long project that they do. It's scaffolded, and it's Texas government, and they have to run for the Texas legislature. They pick the Texas House, Texas State Senate.
Right.
And they do different pieces. The last one's always the best one, where they make their signs and their stump speeches. But one of them is about what committees they'd serve on.
Mhm.
And so they have to learn about what the committees do, but I've aligned that with what their career aspirations are. So it ties in pathways, and it doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't make it more labor intensive on my end. And so if that's all we're asking faculty to do, take one piece of a project or an assessment and add in those GPS principles, and it's done.
Excellent. Well, it's very insightful. I will probably follow up with the two of you a little later, just to pick up on some of the pieces and see about taking collaboration beyond the college, and see how we can both share some of our best practices in the future.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think one question that I have for y'all is just given there's so many moving parts to this. You talked about, I mean, just the stuff that has to go, even like the naming of the schools, the naming of the degree programs, and things like that. I mean, given the fact that this is work that's being done when folks are working remotely, we're in COVID, we've got, students who aren't necessarily, I believe Dallas College was one of the first colleges to announce that they would be online, if I'm not mistaken, for at least the fall semester and all that. So how has COVID impacted your abilities to do this stuff, especially since it really sounds like a lot of your work is really contingent on having one-on-one conversations with folks that are supportive so that they feel supportive? And if you can't do that face to face, how does that work?
Well, I can speak just for myself in that a lot of this is still in the planning stages. The design of the schools of approach, that was reflective of the pathways work we did before, and was just a matter of informing everyone through messaging from our chancellor. The conversations about, and to be completely honest, we, on an almost weekly basis, we are finding out who and how our organizational structure is being completed. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's also stress because of COVID, because of moving online. Change is stressful in and of itself. So dealing with or trying to approach, particularly faculty, with some of these things, it kind of has to be done with kid gloves, because many of them are already overwhelmed with, are they teaching synchronously or asynchronously? How do they set up their online office hours, and how are they reporting? You know, tomorrow ends the first 8 weeks, and so people are completely stressed. So at least for my purposes, much of the professional development for faculty that's been going on so far has related to the move online and best practices and connections and presence online. Since we are going to remain online largely for the spring, here comes the opportunity then to apply those guided pathways principles into the things that you're already doing. So it's fits and starts.
And I just want to add, so being online, being virtual has really, as Sharon mentioned, there's a lot of, it feels weird, man. I mean, there's no better way to put it. So I think one of the things that has been really helpful for us as well, we until we get a lot of the things settled about what we're doing, particularly with our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, is we still have a one-stop shop for our faculty online. That I think Sharon might have alluded to. And I think that has been a really good use of our resources here within our own area, where we have it in kind of our own personal, like, faculty one-stop shop for all the resources they really could need. It is a lot of information and can be overwhelming if you're trying to tackle it all in one day. But I think what's really helpful is the directed links that we have to different resources for faculty to help with different things, including which those resources do direct them back to guided pathways. What is guided pathways? What does this look like, and how are we moving forward with it? As well as all the resources they need for continuing to understand how to do different things in a virtual online format. As well, our faculty have, especially because we are in a very new environment where we're online and we're merging, where we have our constant communication from our provost and our leadership across the board. So if you may have missed the email, because I mean, in these days you get a lot of emails, they're always posting it available to faculty as well to keep up with those updates. So there's a specific link for them to view all of the messages and communication that has been sent specifically to faculty about updates that are going on. So one of the things that I think has been really awesome for all of us in this transition has been the level to which our leadership is trying to communicate everything to folks and make sure that information is being given to them in a way that's easily digestible. So if you can't reach it in email, you can go to this website that's specifically dedicated to faculty to find that information. Because and not just you get it in email, you could see it one day in email and it may not cross your mind to think about it, but when you go back to the one-stop location, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. I think that might have, and you can go, because we know that happens. I mean, we say it happens with our students, and much like our students as faculty and staff, we're the same, where we get information and we digest it differently in different days, depending on the context in which we exist on that day. And so I think that's really important for us to have for all around, is to have that multiple methods of communication, which I think has been a really good thing across the board, because we can just point back and share that link to be like, oh, did you miss it? Here it is, right? So that's a really great tool, especially with all the moving parts.
And I think that we just, like Catherine mentioned, we're just like students, and we need to do what we do with our students all the time is to remind and to replicate and have things in more than one place, so they're defined, and to try to think intuitively. We're trying to do those same things particularly with our faculty, and I think just like with our students, we all, we're granting grace to our students for the reality in which they live right now. And we need to grant that same grace to our faculty and ensure that the things that we want to accomplish, that we roll them out in a way that is not too overwhelming.
Right.
Because the other thing that we've undergone through everything else, has been a real commitment and some strict deadlines on accessibility.
Right.
And so that's been very, very stress-inducing for a lot of our faculty. So we kind of want to get over that hill before we crest the next one.
Right, right. I was just wondering if there is like a blanket message that you typically use to convince a faculty person that they should learn about guided pathways and that they should look at aligning their courses or assessments to the to your goals, your meta majors, or I can't remember exactly the language that you use. I'm trying to think of how to get our own faculty to be more proactive about learning about pathways and to better integrate it to our work.
What I
So
have
with
found,
ours,
go ahead, Catherine.
oh, I was going to say, so with ours, one of the things that really worked is that now our schools of are the career paths. Simple as that, right? Which is kind of a similar approach that I think Alamo colleges did with their institutes, right? And so that was a really great approach, and it's something that we've used as far as calling ours the schools of. The other thing is that our faculty, to some extent, have almost an ownership, if you will, of the guided pathways that they're putting out, in that they really tell us what it is that it should look like, right? On our end, from our office in the guided pathways area, we send it to faculty to say, especially for those in the transfer areas for transfer programs, we specifically say, this is what this will transfer to at these locations. And what we've done is we've gone transfer specific on our guided pathways. So our guided pathways, for example, we have the field of study in biology. That is now, we have 4 guided pathways for the field of study in biology, mapped to each university in the region where students transfer to, because those are our top institutions where students pursue a bachelor's degree for that major. And so because of that, we've got that there, and in working with that particular discipline committee and others like it, have said, so now you know this is what it looks like. Here's what these universities are asking for. How can we get this pathway to be similar in vein, to make sure that not only are the first 2 years going to match what students need for transfer, but everything that they take in the first 2 years will continue to apply to that degree. And I think when we do it that way with our faculty, there's more ownership, if you will, of what is in the pathway itself, because they know the faculty, our faculty are content experts, no matter what. And that's true of anyone who sits as a faculty member within their respective discipline. You are the content expert, and particularly with those in our institutions who are very well aware of the needs of the professional discipline, and for those who are going to have a career afterwards within that discipline. I mean, they know, and they can tell us with certainty, this course isn't, they may take this course with us, but it can't be online, or it can't be this. And so this is how we need to make sure that it does X, Y, and Z, so that way the end result that the student wants to get to is meaningful. And so it's really relying on them and helping them to say, so this is what they need to transfer. So what do you want the pathway to look like ultimately, and how would we work on that together? And so that's really been a very good partnership to have with our faculty, because honestly, they're the ones who know their programs best, and faculty know exactly how they can capture a student into the program and make sure they stay on the program. They know when students have questions about programs, they're right there. So it's been really, really important for faculty to have that, and in our view, to have that ownership of it, and really say that this is their guided pathway. So they continue to direct students to get onto the pathway and help them stay on the pathway. And I think that helps in the long run too. So that way there's kind of that meaningful relationship with the pathway itself. And then when we start having these conversations about how to take it further than just the actual map itself, then we can contextualize it beyond the items within the map to more of, well, what is it that they should be doing as they're going through this process to get the degree? And I think that's kind of at the next step of where we want to get to, that we were hoping to get to earlier, right? Because we've got big goals. But, you know, we know that things happen and life happens along the way.
Yeah. Great.
And what I think we need to do too is, again, with our reorganization, we have to reach our executive leadership. And our executive leadership then have to reinforce the messages that come down. And so we have now these vice provosts, and they are the leads of each of the schools, which are based upon our career paths.
Right.
And so we need to have communications with them about, okay, you're the head of this thing that Guided Pathways helped create. Now we need to take that next step, and it can't just be a forwarded email from me or from Catherine about a Pathways issue. It has to be something that's reinforced and becomes part of the culture.
Excellent, thank you.
Muted. Okay, so thank you all very much for presenting. We really appreciate it. Thank you all for attending. You know, let us know if you don't get the PowerPoint, you can email me. I'll be happy to share it. But you know, thank you, Dr. Manna, Dr. Olivarez. It's great to have the chance to learn from you. So thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.